Welcome to Police Academy Prep. This is Deputy Z. Today we will be going through our law enforcement professional quick tips prep training series focused on preparing you for the road as a law enforcement officer or deputy. This series will include recommended response guidelines for over 50 different situations you will encounter and provide insight as to what to expect. Before we jump into the material, quick disclaimer, make sure to follow your agency policies and procedures when responding to these types of incidents. So this video is going to be on responding to traffic crashes that either turn into civil matters or self-report traffic crashes. So there's a few scenarios where a traffic crash will turn into either a civil matter or a self-report. Before I get into those situations, I'll go through the Florida DMV website on when individuals are supposed to report a traffic crash to 911, to law enforcement. So the first one is a crash with an injury, a crash with a fatality, a hit-and-run crash, a DUI crash, a crash which requires a record to remove the vehicle, a crash with a commercial motor vehicle, or a crash where apparent damage is at least $500. Now, if it is not any of those, then technically they are allowed to be self-reported as a traffic crash without law enforcement filling out a traffic crash report. So if you respond to a scene and it does not fit one of those situations here, you can advise parties that they can self-report or they can handle among themselves in lieu of a traffic crash report. Now, if anyone comes to you and says, no, I want a traffic crash report, then following agency policies and procedures, you will provide them with a traffic crash report. Now, I always recommend this if it doesn't fall into one of these, because a lot of people sometimes will not even want to do a traffic crash report. They want to handle among themselves. There have been many situations where I've come up on a traffic crash scene, usually your minor fender bender, bumper to bumper, side swipe, etc., where you got a couple scrapes. Sometimes the scrapes just wipe off with your fingers, etc. And the people actually tell me as I'm walking up, hey, we don't need your assistance, or they'll say, we decided to handle among ourselves, it's no big deal. At that point, you can't force somebody to have a traffic crash report, right? So that is where that will come in handy. And to code a call out like that, you would either code it as a signal 4 traffic crash, 98, which means mission complete, and Foxtrot, which means it is basically becoming a traffic crash without a report or a self-report. The other way you can code a call like this out would be a 6698 echo, meaning it's a civil matter and you're coding it out echo, because technically traffic crashes are civil matters when they're not crimes, and people are allowed to handle among themselves. Now, I would say that if the damage maybe happens to be above 500, remember, this is all apparent, right? So it's all your perspective. If the damage is bad, maybe more than 500, as long as the airbags didn't really go off and the vehicles aren't like totaled, then that's also fine as well. Especially even if they're undrivable, it requires a wrecker. I mean, if they're in a parking lot or if they're on private property or somewhere that's not blocking traffic, then I would say they're fine as well. If they're like, hey, we're going to get our own tow, don't worry about it, then at the end of the day, you're good to go. There'll also be times where you'll be responding to a traffic crash and dispatch will come over and say, hey, they want to cancel, they want to handle among themselves. You say, great, that's the perfect time to use 6698 echo, because you don't even know if it was a traffic crash. You weren't even there. So you wouldn't code that signal 498 Foxtrot. You would code that a 66 echo. Another thing, if you happen to be in a really busy district or city and you are slammed, maybe you have a hot call come out, everybody's on it, you're on a burglary in progress, etc. If you get some downtime, you see a traffic crash in the queue that's been there for an hour or 2 hours, you can always quickly call them and say, hey, look, as long as there's no injuries or fatalities, it's not a hit and run, it's not a whole lot of damage, you can go to the Florida DMV website and you can self-report. I would always recommend tell them, hey, get each other's phone numbers, take pictures of their IDs, take pictures of the damage, take pictures of the license plate, and then they can self-report through the traffic crash self-report portal through the Florida DMV website. So that's always a good thing to store in the back of your brain if you ever need to give someone that type of advice. So this is just a little more information on handling traffic crashes and dealing with people that don't want a traffic crash report, or it's super minor. You can always suggest this as an option to people so that they don't have to wait for you to do a report for them. They can just get the information, go home, and do it themselves. Deputy Z signing off. Catch you guys on the next video.